And you are a magic light bulb. Everybody wants your brightness. Dark days will come and go, but you're still burning in the cold. You are your force to reckon with. When you eat, you feed your soul. No one can stop your shine. One more breath towards your goals. Breathe, 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 you're a champion. Let them see what's in your blood.
Kaieteur Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burbies 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
It is 19 hours 30 all across Guyana, and you're listening to Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. It is time to enter room 592, where we unleash the truth. This evening at the helm of the program, as usual, Dr. Yog Mahadio, alongside his co-host, senior journalist of Kaieteur News, Mr. Leonard Gildari, and their esteemed guest tonight, Mr. Anil Nandlall. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you, Kevin. Good evening to you. Good evening to our guest, Mr. Nandlall. Good evening to my co-host, Mr. Gildari. Ladies and gentlemen, all across Guyana, the Caribbean, wherever you're joining us from, and of course, all across the US and Canada, let me make special mention of them, of you, our brothers and sisters there in Miami, New York, Minnesota, Minneapolis. I know you are getting onto this program because you have all been sending messages. Hello to Abitunes Radio. Hello to Farouk Juman. Hello to Mala, Hari Prasad, and all those who are carrying this feed to your viewers all across our diaspora. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from all across Guyana to room 592, where we unleash the truth. Mr. Gildari, today has been a very a nice day, hasn't it been? It's been a wonderfully interesting day, ladies and gentlemen. Before even asking Mr. Gildari and before bringing on our guests, I must tell you, room 592 is where we unleash the truth. Tonight, former Attorney General, a master in his own right on all aspects of law, not just constitutional law. Those of you who would have seen Mr. Nandlall in the courtroom, as I've been privileged to, you see a piece of work on display when you see this man argue a case. So that aside, though, tonight he is in the hot seat. And before I ask our esteemed guest and my co-host to say anything, brothers and sisters, as I welcome you once again to room 592, let me acknowledge Kevin Smith, Joshua Van Slytman. Let me acknowledge Glenn Lal, the entire Kaieteur Radio crew for making tonight's program a wonderful program and a possibility. Let me also thank Kaieteur Radio and their entire team that's working hard behind the scenes. But ladies and gentlemen, what's been happening over these past couple of days? Let me just say this very quickly. A recount was done and they had a delay. CARICOM report was done and they had a delay. Every single day there is one conceivable or inconceivable machination made by this squatter government to stay in office. I've said so before and I wish to repeat it. They are squatting in office. They lost these elections and they know that, because no more are they saying they have won. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, Mr. David Green just said he doesn't interfere with GCOM. Then he said, there's a 4-step process. Let us wait for number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But before number 1 started, there was problem. Before number 2 started, they had the Ulita Moore case. Before number 3 got started, you got this David versus GCOM case. Who knows what's going to happen before declaration? And this is why we have this legal luminary here tonight. But ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of you have felt depressed today. I want to say to you, and Mr. Nandlall will correct me if I'm wrong, I did not see anything happen today that make me take worry, make me depressed in any way. Because here is what, fact 1, the CEO, had already advised the commission on the numbers of valid votes cast. Don't forget that. The CEO has already advised the commission. The commission's chairman then sent the CEO to go bring me the numbers, which includes the numbers that make up the seats in the National Assembly. And fact number 3, there are only valid votes that were counted twice in this process, on the night of March 2nd and during this 30-odd days of recount. Only valid votes were in those boxes that were printed on money paper, boxes that had the ballot sheets that had all the security features. Only valid votes were counted. So all the narrative you're creating, I wish to remind you, they are allegations. They are allegations of irregularities that deserve their respect if true to see their day in court. But that has to come after a declaration. In my view, ladies and gentlemen, therefore, the court said nothing new to Madam Chairman Claudette Singh. The court says nothing new to this woman who has been a distinguished former judge. Basically, what they have achieved is 4 to 5 days of delay of declaration of a president. But ladies and gentlemen, to tell us really in his own legal mind and to break it down in layman terms, I will hesitate no further but hand over the microphone to our former Attorney General and legal luminary, as also a member of the PPP slate, Mr. Anil Nandlall. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, Yog, and good evening, Gildari. Thank you for accommodating me on your program. And good evening to your listeners across Guyana, the Caribbean, and in North America and elsewhere. Yog, perhaps a convenient point to begin is to reiterate that the people of Guyana spoke on March the 2nd, and they chose a government of their choice. The votes were counted on the night of March the 2nd, and the results were known. Then we had a whole host of attempts to steal the votes of the electorate of this country. You had Mingo, they went to court several times, and you know the shenanigans. I don't need to repeat it. Then the votes were recounted publicly, broadcast on the airwaves of this country, and tabulated every afternoon on live television. The rules of the recount were made and agreed upon by every single political party and the commission, at the level of the commission, because the commission reflects by its composition all the political parties. They sat down and they drafted the rules that will determine votes and valid votes, etc. And those votes were tabulated every afternoon and totaled. And then the chief elections officer was assigned the responsibility of doing the total tabulation, meaning aggregating the votes tabulated by the 10 regional certificates and summarizing the observation report and presenting it to the commission. As you correctly said, there are 2 sheets of paper among the papers presented by Lowenfield, and they constitute an aggregation of the total valid votes cast for the regional elections and the national elections. And the papers say so on their face. It had each party, how much votes each party got, and it got the total valid votes. That is what it says. So the commission already has a total of valid votes cast. Then Lowenfield tried to do some jiggery-pokery by making adjustments and deductions based upon allegations which were made during the recount. Allegations that the president interlocutor, the president said that CARICOM observation team was the most legitimate interlocutor and that their report must be taken into by the commission. That report examined and analyzed those allegations at length and said that they were incapable of invalidating any vote, that they were a fishing expedition that attracted very limited drawings from it, that most of them were frivolous and vexatious. A multitude of adjectives were used by the CARICOM team in debunking and denouncing these very allegations. Then in addition to that, at a meeting of June the 18th, the commission, through the chairperson, made a unanimous decision saying that the commission can't deal with credibility of the elections, that the commission has already, during the recount process, determined the validity of the votes, and all the votes totals were valid votes. Invalid votes were already discounted and put in separate envelopes at the recount process. And the chairperson says anyone who wishes to further challenge any legality or illegality in relation to the elections must go to the High Court in accordance with the Constitution and the National Assembly Validity of Elections Act. That was a clear, unanimous decision of GCOM. So two things have already been established. One, valid votes have already been determined by the commission, and Lowenfield has been already directed to go and total those valid votes and prepare the requisite statutory forms, because he totaled it already. Just to plug them into the relevant statutory forms referred to in the ROPA, section 99 in particular. And he must come back with that report. When you look at the statutory form, all he has to do is calculate the seats, identify the presidential candidate that has received the presidential candidate of the list that has received the most votes, and identify that person as the president and bring the seats that each party would have done.
Right.
That is all that Lowenfield has to do. Now, when they realized, perhaps, I don't know, that Lowenfield was moving in that direction, because he has no other latitude, he can't act independent of the commission. I have pointed out in two statutory provisions, section 18 and section 19 of the Election Laws Amendment Act, that the Chief Elections Officer and the Deputy Chief Elections Officer at all material times must act in accordance with the direction of the commission. So when Lowenfield bring that bundle of papers, the GCOM, by a unanimous decision, clarified for him what is it that he was required to do and directed him to do only that. Lowenfield cannot countermand or depart from that direction. So, knowing that that is the position, they ran now to the Court of Appeal with what every lawyer of substance described as a frivolous and vexatious application, invoking a special jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal, wrongly dressing up a matter to make it fit within the four parameters of that narrow jurisdiction, where the Court of Appeal allows someone to challenge the election of a president based only upon his qualification, and to interpret the Constitution relative to the qualification of the president. Yog, I pause here to say that nowhere on planet Earth will a judiciary ever be empowered to defeat the will of the electorate. No judiciary can direct a constitutional body how to perform its constitutional functions once that body operates within the four corners of the law. You will note that no pronouncement by the Court of Appeal today, no pronouncement was directed to any illegality on the part of GCOM. It means that GCOM, the Court of Appeal, found obviously that GCOM was acting intra vires and within its powers. A number of reliefs were sought today. One, a declaration that GCOM must determine that GCOM has failed to determine a credible count. That was the first relief. That was dismissed. I will skip the second relief for the time being. The third relief is as an injunction restraining the Chief Elections Officer from complying with the directions of the chairman. That was dismissed. The third one, an order restraining the Chief Elections Officer from complying with the direction of the chairman. That was dismissed. Then another one, an order restraining the Chief Elections Officer from submitting to GCOM the report. That was dismissed. And then another one, an order restraining the Chief Elections Officer from submitting a report again. That was dismissed. The only one that was granted is an order that the words, they said that they're granting a declaration that the words more votes cast in Article 177 2b means more valid votes cast. Now, brothers, this is the Constitution of the Republic of Guyana. This is our supreme law. When it says that a president will be elected based upon the list that he is from, that has received the more votes cast, tell me how that will not only mean valid votes. How can the Constitution ever contemplate that a president will be elected on invalid votes? You understand what I'm saying? And all the Court of Appeal has done is say that more valid votes cast in Article 177, more votes cast, means more valid votes. The Constitution can only refer to valid votes. How a president can be elected on invalid votes?
Correct.
So the Court of Appeal has made a non-decision. Whenever votes is referred to in the law, how can it mean invalid votes?
Correct.
When money, when a dollar is referred to in the law, how can it mean a counterfeit dollar? It can only mean a valid dollar. Correct. So when you go to court and the court says dollar means valid dollar, what nonsense is that?
Absolutely.
So nothing has been decided today.
Absolutely. Well put there.
Nothing has been decided today.
Correct.
When the court says every citizen of Guyana, it means every legal citizen of Guyana. It can't mean an illegal citizen of Guyana.
Correct.
This is the law that we are speaking about, bro.
Correct.
And it is as simple as that, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
So the decision of the Court of Appeal has changed nothing.
So, Counsel, I want to come in here. If the Chief Elections Officer, Kaieteur Lowenfield, presents a report which he feels is valid, what then? And then it turns up that it is not reflective of the figure that would have been submitted in the first instance.
Leonard, that is why I said the Chief Elections Officer can only prepare the report that the Commission directs him to prepare. He cannot prepare a report of his own making and concoction. If that was the law, then every Chief Elections Officer will determine who the next government is by concocting his own results. And if that is the law, we might as well abolish elections. It makes no sense we vote because some officer During the process, Mingo thought that he had that power, so Mingo concocted figures, put them on a spreadsheet, and says that those are the total votes cast in Region 4. The court declared Mingo's declaration as invalid and unlawful, applying that very principle. Lowenfield can't arrogate onto himself a power to manufacture figures, fictitious figures, and present them to a commission, because, as I said, every chief elections office at this stage of the electoral process can determine who the next government is in any respective territory or country. And that cannot be the law. Your common sense will militate against that.
Where common sense seems not to be the thing that is happening. So what happens if such figures are presented? Could the commission and the chairperson refuse?
The commission obviously reserves a residuary power to reject a fraudulent report or a report that does not reflect the will of the people. And that is why Claudette Singh, Madam Chairman, in her letter to Lowenfield, read back the letter. He says, bring this report for the commission's consideration. Read back the letter. I'm sorry you don't have it.
Yes.
Or else I have it somewhere in my phone. Bring the report pursuant to Article 177 of the Constitution and Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act for the consideration of the commission. And read the recount order. It says exactly that. Because obviously, not any report which the man submits can bind the commission. Report can only mean legal report. Let us borrow their argument.
Correct.
They say that total votes can only mean total valid votes, when the report that Lowenfield has to bring can only be a legal report. Isn't that what the Court of Appeal ruled today?
That's right.
So when Lowenfield brings this report, it got to be a legal report. Or you want us to go to the court now to determine what the report means. And we will do this for the rest of the year. You follow what I'm telling you?
Yes. Yes. Well, you're right, Counsel, because I do have it, just for our viewers and listeners, to what Counsel was referring. Pursuant to Article 1772B of the Constitution and Section 96 of the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 103, you are hereby requested to prepare and submit your report by 1300 hours on 18th June 2020, using the results of the recount for consideration by the Commission.
Using the results of the recount for consideration. These words, are etched in my head.
Yes.
All these documents. So, I want to deal though. So, I hope that I've answered that aspect of the program, that aspect of the question. But let us deal with the Court of Appeal decision. The Court of Appeal, unfortunately, and whatever remarks I say here about the Court of Appeal, I say it with the greatest of respect and in the exercise of my right to make critical commentary about a decision. And as a right that I have. I'm not being contemptuous of the court. I'm not disrespecting the court. But I have a freedom as well to criticize a court's decision. Now, that Court of Appeal decision has plunged the laws of this country into total chaos. You have division between the High Court and the Court of Appeal, where the High Court under Article 163 is resided with powers to determine certain questions regarding legality and illegality of elections. My brother, that has been the position since we became independent. And no court has ever ruled otherwise. No court, consistently. From 1968, we have been having these questions being put before our courts. And consistently the court has said that these questions must go to the High Court by way of elections petition. Throughout the Commonwealth, that is the uniformed position. Every country in the Commonwealth. There may be slight variations, Where, for example, Malawi, the commission has a little more power than our GCOM has. In India, the commission has a little more power than our GCOM has. So when Basil Williams are plucking these cases out, he's refusing to tell you the statutory and constitutional construct against which these cases were determined by the respective courts of those countries. But that's another. So what this Court of Appeal has done today, at least two judges, they have eradicated the distinction, because in the course of their judgment, you are not clear anymore when you can go to the High Court and when you can come to the Court of Appeal. Because interchangeably, they have been saying that you must go to the High Court to determine parliamentary elections and go to the Court of Appeal to determine presidential elections.
Right.
My brother, if you go to the court and you lose an election petition, is the whole government goes out of power. Is that it? How can you conceive a situation where the parliament, the party loses, the government loses the election petition, so the government must go, all the MPs must go, but the president remains? How is that even possible? But that's what they said today, that elections for National Assembly must go to the High Court, and elections for the president must be determined by the Court of Appeal. So let us say we won our 2015 petition. Let us say we had won it, and we were to form the government. Are you telling me that Mr. Granger would have stayed in the government, and we would have stayed as president, and we would have been in the government? When Granger was the head of a ticket, the presidential candidate of a ticket, of a list that lost the elections by virtue of the election petition. You understand what they have done to the laws of this country? But let us look at how they have given themselves jurisdiction when all the lawyers for the respondents say that they don't have jurisdiction. Nowhere, it is not contested that the commission, that the papers that were filed, the motion, does not question the qualification of the president. Not a word about that. Right there and without more, the case doesn't fit within Article 177 of the Constitution. Because there's that narrow issue. And you cannot read or the interpretation of this Constitution in isolation from the rest of the paragraph. One of the most elementary principles of statutory interpretation is that you have to read the section as a whole, and then the other secondary rule, secondary to that, because it's the primary rule, is that you have to read the Constitution as a whole. How can you pluck 3 words out of the Constitution and pluck it out and separate it from the rest of the context?
Right.
Contextually, words carry meaning in a particular context. These are basic rules of interpretation, my brother.
Right.
So when they say qualifications of the president or interpretation of the Constitution, or yes, it's disjunctive, but it can mean any interpretation of any provision of the Constitution. That doesn't make sense, especially since the High Court, you must have heard the saying that the High Court is the guardian of the Constitution. That is not a saying, it is a legal truism. What that means is that you want to interpret the Constitution, you want to enforce the Constitution, you go to the High Court.
Right.
And that has been the practice from the imposition of constitutional democracy in Guyana from 1966. And every practicing lawyer knows that. So that's the first point I want to make. So clearly, the motion could not have fit into this provision. Secondly, the provision says this, Article 177(5). Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, Parliament may make provision for giving effect to the provisions of this title. I stop here. Parliament may make provision for the giving effect to the provision of this title. All the judges today agree that Parliament has not given effect. Parliament has not passed law to give effect to the title.
Right.
So how the title becomes effected? What give effect means, my brother?
Correct.
Give effect means to bring into effect, to make effectual. If the law is not passed to activate the provision, then the provision remains unactivated. Now they have used a ruling in a case called John Doe and the Attorney General. Let me explain what John Doe decided. You know, under the Constitution, you have what is called fundamental rights and freedoms. One of those fundamental rights and freedoms has to do with protection of private property. John Doe case had to do when the Linden-Suicide Highway was being constructed, and the government of the day compulsorily acquired lands for the construction of that highway. John Doe lands were among those seized. John Doe went to court by a constitutional application to claim protection of that fundamental right of protection of property. Now that fundamental right is declared in the Constitution, and the Constitution says that any person who feels that this right is going to be threatened or the right is being taken away, you have an access to approach the High Court for remedy. Now, at that time, there was no procedure made to go to the High Court. But the rights were already crystallized. So when the man went by any procedure, the court says, look, the framers of the Constitution could not have intended to deny you your fundamental rights because some rule-making authority omitted to make a procedure by which you should access these fundamental rights. So you see, there was an absence of procedure. But here you have the Constitution itself saying that subject to the provision of this Constitution, Parliament may make provision for the giving effect to the provisions of this title. You see the distinction?
Yes.
One is the absence of a procedure, and one here is where the law doesn't come into force.
Correct.
Until Parliament may make. Now, if you compare this with the same 163 that says you must come to, when you want to challenge an election, you must come by election petition. The identical provision is there. Parliament may make provisions by how you can access your rights under this. And in that case, Parliament made provisions.
Correct.
By way of a whole act, the National Assembly Validity of Elections Act. Here, Parliament omitted to do that. So how are you the court? You are not Parliament. You can't give effect to a constitutional provision that is not in effect. So that's the second point I want to make.
Right.
The third point I want to make is that the thing says very clearly that it has to do with determining any question as to the validity of the election of a president. Now, our laws define an election from the time the last cycle of registration is done, preceding an election. You know, every time you have an election, there is one last cycle where you put on people who will reach that age on voting day.
Correct.
Right? That last cycle.
Yes.
When that last cycle begins to turn, the election begins. And it ends with the declaration of the final results. We have no declaration of the final results. So how can you invoke this provision?
Correct. Right.
So in my respectful view, the Court of Appeal, on those grounds alone, fell hopelessly into error, at least the two judges.
Right. So,
And they had no power, therefore, to make the other pronouncement which they made, which I have already explained,
yes,
is
yes,
a non-decision.
correct. So, in terms of our viewers and listeners out there, Counsel, I just want to say this: viewers and listeners, remember, you can tell your friends, you can tell your family. We are also live on radio right across the country, 99.1, 99.5 FM. So we do know that a lot of you, and Leonard, let's give credit to all the viewers and listeners all across the coast, even Pomeroon, that has been calling and said they're coming on to this program. We're, Council, we're receiving tons and tons of messages as we speak of persons who are also on air listening, but they're sending us WhatsApp messages and so forth. Remember, you can send your WhatsApp message to 622 2222. So, in other words, as Leonard would put it, 222. Right, Leonard? Did I get it right?
62222. You got to get it right,
There
man.
you go. So, Council, I want to come back to you on the point. Is there any possibility in your mind that Lowenfield can now do a second advisory to the commission that is contrary to his first advice? Because what you have said clearly, he already advised the commission where the numbers of valid votes are concerned from the recount.
Lowenfield can physically do anything, but he cannot legally produce advice or a report that conflicts with what the recount totals generate, what the recount totals are,
Right.
or generated by the recount exercise. He cannot do that legally. And therefore, as I said, the commission reserves the power to reject Lowenfield's report. You see, you have to understand that the law is, Lowenfield is not the first chief elections officer. It is not the first time that we have had recounts done. We may not have had national recount, meaning all the regions, but every election there were recounts, and every election Keith Lowenfield, or the chief elections officer, has to perform this function. You can recall Mr. Alexander likes to boast about some story with Gokul Budu, when he says at one time Gokul Budu presented to them a certificate that was inaccurate. And he, Alexander, took credit for identifying the inaccuracy, and as a result, the commission rejected the certificate or the report, and the man had to put it back.
Yeah, he did make that assertion in one of our sessions in room 592.
Exactly. So therefore, it is not unprecedented for a report to come which does not reflect the true results. I mean, it's a rarity, but as Alexander himself pointed out, it happened. So the commission, as I said, has the power to direct him to bring the, and if he refuses, the commission also has the power to declare the results. Because Article 162, vests the commission with very wide powers to complete an election. So does Section 22, of the Election Laws Amendment Act. It gives GCOM a whole host of powers to do that which is necessary to conclude a fair elections. So GCOM has that responsibility. And as I said, the court grants nothing else. The court could have granted all these orders restraining Lowenfield from presenting the report, directing which report Lowenfield should present. The court could have declared that GCOM has failed to determine final credible count or the credibility of the result for the general elections. All of that the court could have determined. They were all before the court because the court, as I said, took jurisdiction, although I think it wrongly did so, as I have established or explained, but it did so. Yet it did not see it fit to grant any of these relief.
That's right. And that is remarkable indeed. Council, let me just acknowledge Sam and a few others that's coming all the way from Hong Kong, looking at this program from Hong Kong. We got viewers from Norway. Hello to you guys. I know you're the other side of the world. We got viewers from literally all across the world: Antigua, Barbados, St. Kitts, Suriname, Brazil. All over the place we have viewers from. So we want to say hello to you and remind everybody in Guyana, you can get us on 99.1, 99.5 FM band. So, Council, here are some questions coming in from you, if you don't mind. Sorry to upset your
No, go ahead.
So, there is a 3-day stay. Does this or should this 3-day have any impact on the commission? While saying that, I wish to acknowledge, I think we have seen news that the commission has called for a meeting. I don't know whether that is confirmed or not. Over to you, sir.
Yes, I heard that there is likely to be a meeting tomorrow. The 3-day stay of the decision, well, the decision, the Court of Appeal did not grant an order. It did not grant a positive order for someone to do something. Neither did it grant a negative order restraining someone from doing something. So really there is nothing to stay. All the court has said is that the meaning of the words more votes cast means more valid votes cast. In my view, whether you stay that or you don't stay that, it doesn't make a difference.
Correct.
Because the Constitution and the law can only speak to valid votes. Therefore, that declaration, or whatever you want to call it, is odious, redundant, superfluous.
So in hindsight, if I may, Counsel, it was an exercise in futility from the perspective of which you were speaking that just ended up delaying the declaration by another, what was it, Leonard, 4 days, 5 days? And until the commission now meets and gets the second report from Lowenfield, it's a further delay, isn't it?
But yes, it is a further delay, and hopefully the commission will not consider itself in any way hindered in discharging its functions. Because with or without this court order, I see no difference. Were I Justice Singh and the commission, Justice Singh and the commission already decided valid votes. At the meeting of June the 18th, I have the written decision of the commission here. They were only referring to valid votes. I mean, I can't imagine a commission will direct the chief election officer to bring a declaration based on invalid votes.
Right.
There is what you call a presumption of regularity in law. Omnia presumuntur rites acta. All public bodies and constitutional commissions and legal authorities are presumed to act correctly unless you can show otherwise.
Right.
You have to rebut that presumption.
Right.
So when the commission direct Lowenfield to go total the votes, obviously they mean total votes, valid votes. They can't direct him to bring invalid votes. The invalid votes were not counted, they were invalid.
That's right.
Meaning that they were rejected or spoiled ballots.
Yes.
And put in separate containers.
Right.
And obviously, nobody can seriously argue. Unfortunately, it was not argued at the Court of Appeal. I wanted them to argue that Lowenfield can arrogate unto himself the power to hear and determine these allegations, elevate them into evidence, and then make a finding upon them all by himself without hearing anyone. I mean, that is the height of ludicrosity. If anyone believes that Lowenfield has the power to discount votes based upon the allegation received from one contesting party, elevate those allegations into facts, and then use them to deduct or invalidate people's votes. I mean, you got to be bordering on lunacy to think that Lowenfield has that power. So
Correct.
anybody who put forward that argument, they need to be certified as insane.
Correct. So, Council,
Now, the other point I want to make
yes.
is that if you go through all the cases dealing with elections, they will tell you that the right to vote is one of the most sacrosanct and cherished rights in a democratic society. It is akin, it is protected by the constitution of most countries.
Mm-hmm.
It is akin to a fundamental right and freedom. And no person can lose that right to vote other than by a judicial process,
Right.
where he must be afforded an opportunity to be heard, represented by a lawyer, told the allegation against him why his vote is likely to be invalidated, allowed an opportunity to cross-examine and test that evidence,
That's right.
and allow the opportunity to also lead evidence of his own.
Correct.
You tell me that Lowenfield will incarnate himself into that kind of powerful person or personage or institution and invalidate tens of thousands of votes?
Mm-hmm.
No rational mind
Correct. Yes.
can,
Yes.
can assimilate that and process that.
Well, but we have seen one step or another of irrationality since March 3rd to now. And let
Well,
me just yes, go on.
Yeah, it is for that reason. It is for that reason that our team of lawyers, we are not going to sleep tonight. We have to think this thing through.
Mm-hmm.
Not because we feel that this decision in any way harms us or is dangerous or can be acted upon, but simply because we live in a society where politicians now are going to misinterpret this order, abuse it, manipulate it for their own political design
Mm-hmm.
and the furtherance of their political agenda, as they did with the no confidence motion,
Correct.
as they did with so many court decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And we will lack clarity on the way forward, and we have a society that is prone to violence when things are not, going in a particular direction. And then the other issue is we have to consider whether, seriously, as a lawyer, I cannot leave the state of the law in this state of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Because what will happen? Where do you go next? When you want to challenge an elections petition, where do you go? Do you come back to the Court of Appeal? Because the election petition also involves a challenge to the presidency. And this court ruled that you can only challenge the presidency here. So do I file one case in the Court of Appeal to challenge the presidency and another case in the High Court by way of an election petition?
Right.
Do you understand the state of confusion that our legal system has been plunged into? So, for the purpose of clarity of the law and to bring order back to the society and put the law on its proper footing, we may have to be forced as responsible citizens take this case forward only for the purpose of bringing some kind of legal equilibrium to the state of our law so that in the future
That's right.
we don't know where, because if you don't appeal and the time goes, expires for appealing, remember, you don't have a right at large to appeal. You have time frame.
Correct.
And if we don't appeal and we leave the law in this state of chaos, I don't know what will happen in the future.
Correct.
there will be a complete breakdown of law and order in this country.
Because, Counsel, one of the sad realities that is coming up is that here is a government that just refuses to accept that it must get out of office. From the no confidence motion to now, this government has shown that regardless of what you do as a people or as a country, we're not going to come out from office. And so with all of this shenanigans, it throws a very, very dangerous future ahead for us as a people, because it means any government in the future can decide elections don't matter, to your point you had made earlier.
Yes, they may hold that view now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long they will continue to hold that view. But the people of Guyana will not relent. I will not relent until they are removed from government.
Correct. And Counsel, to the point you made a minute ago with regards to the misinterpretation, and this is why you feel compelled. You feel compelled to take this thing to the highest highest score that you can get to give clarity. One of your former colleagues, no other than Mr. Moses Nagamutu, would have said in one of the messages I'm seeing coming into me, he has said that the ruling will allow submission of a report of the valid votes of the elections commissions before the winner is declared. And on the basis of the valid votes, the incumbent coalition government will be re-elected for a second term.
Moses Nagamutu is an utter disgrace to this country and to the legal profession. And I say it so boldly and without any apology whatsoever. Moses Nagamutu is part of the political demagoguery that is going on out there. Moses Nagamutu is encouraging political dictatorship. And this is a man who loves to invoke the name of Chelly Jagan in his mouth. And that is what he will say. And you know what? He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. And he is essentially telling you that Lowenfield can discount 275,000 votes from the people of this country so that his party and his government can win. Don't you realize that there's a madman who's speaking there?
Correct. So, Counsel, you already answered the question, even though we didn't ask you whether the CCJ steps were the next. However, on a more realistic perspective to the people of this country that is just seeing that the declaration is being thwarted one way or the other, in Mr. Anil Nandlall's mind, not could, in your mind, will the commission move ahead with any degree of alacrity to get to the zenith of a declaration?
I can only speak to what the commission ought to do and what its legal duties are. The legal duties of the commission is to declare the results as soon as is practicable. The commission knows the results. The commission recounted these votes. Is that we recounted it? Is the commission who did it? We were merely participants. They tabulated it. Their officers signed every report, every certificate. Their officers certified every SOR. Read the SORs and the total at the bottom of every single SOR, it has total valid votes. Then those SORs were not total by us. They were total by GCOM staff every afternoon in a tabulation center.
Right.
And then when one region was finished, they were amalgamated and certified as the total valid votes for that particular electoral district.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lowenfield totaled them himself, the 10 districts, and presented to the commission. Right. So the commission cannot pretend now to not know what the valid votes are. And the commission, therefore, under the laws of Guyana and under the oath of office that each commissioner took, including the chairman,
mm-hmm.
They took an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of this country without fear, favor, or prejudice. And that is what they are enjoined to do. Nothing short of that.
So, Counsel, another question for you. Listening to the decision this afternoon, I found it amazing. And again, this is in no way being disrespectful to the court. I'm just seeking your legal brain here now to help me out, because the Madam Justice Don Gregory Barnes did refer to Kim Kite's submission on contextual meaning. I mean, I did a little reading in law, and I know that is
that was amazing.
Yeah, that is extremely. But she acknowledged it and then threw it out of the window immediately.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that. When the judge, that particular judge, was making reference to the contextual argument, I felt a little at ease, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bala just disappeared.
It disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't understand how it, you know.
Correct. But she also mentioned, and you as a former attorney general, forget politics for a moment. She also mentioned, and she used words like extreme. She said that the AG's submission aligned with the applicant, and even in a more extreme way. Now, the AG there is, sir, you as a former AG, is not representing a political party rather than a government of a government?
But, and of course, but you don't expect anything better. Ulita Moore matter, President Granger signed an agreement with CARICOM along with opposition leader Mr. Bharat Jagdeo. And the very next day, Ulita Moore, a candidate on the APNU list represented by Roysdale Ford, a candidate on APNU list, moves to the court to block the recount. These people don't have any shame. These are people they want to steal an election. They want to steal an entire government. The whole world condemn them. And yet they are continuing their pursuit of thievery. And you bothering with what Basil Williams doing?
Well,
what do you expect? What do you expect, brother?
Well, look, and one of the disturbing phrases I heard today was that they deemed this thing disjunctive yet not absurd. But you taking this matter further is going to question the very basis of the disjunctive yet not absurd.
I believe that people have persuaded themselves that the matter is not appealable. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the decision will not be reviewed.
Okay.
And therefore, one can write, liberally.
Right. But you are right from the basis that if you do not get this matter sorted out, it leaves a lot of openness going to the future, something that I think as a legal mind you do not want to even contemplate. So that's why you want to nail it down. But given the way that the decision made, I'm reading to you a question from one of our contributors to this program, Mr. Ramesh Prasad. He said, is there a difference between valid votes? Well, using the decision that's made, it seems to imply that there is a difference between valid votes cast for a president and valid votes cast for a member of the National Assembly. If Lowenfield is to invalidate votes for the presidency, wouldn't he be invalidating votes for the members of the National Assembly for which the High Court was now given jurisdiction over?
Most naturally, because you are voting for a list of candidates, of which the presidential candidate is one. So you are voting for the list, the party list. Mm-hmm. And implicitly, you are also voting for the presidency. And that is the danger of this judicial reasoning. They have bifurcated the two. And they have ruled that you must challenge it two different places when it is one ballot. I did not vote directly for Irfan Ali. I vote for the People's Progressive Party. But I know that when I vote for the People's Progressive Party, I am also voting for Irfan Ali. But I did not cast a second ballot.
Right.
That is why when you question an election in the election petition under the High Court, in the High Court, sorry, and if you are successful, the entire government goes. Because the reliefs that are granted by the court under the National Assembly of Validity of Elections Act is an order directing the government to move out of office, or an order calling for fresh elections within so and so time, or an order removing one government and installing another.
Right.
How can you do that and leave the president?
Correct. Yeah.
How
Because
can you separate the president from the list? The
correct.
president was not elected directly. He was elected ex officio almost.
Mm-hmm.
And if
He
I
was
may,
elected
counsel,
by virtue of being the head of the list.
if I may, counsel, could you say if there's a possibility for this to be taken, let's say, a case to be taken to the CCJ to preempt what can happen or what could happen if Lowenfield decide to go in another direction?
Yeah, well, as I said, more likely than not, we will be appealing. Simply because we feel that the law has to be clarified for the future. Of course, if we will be before the CCJ, if we see it low and feel moving in a particular direction, as I said, you have the safety mechanism of the commission. So that that will be used as a buffer for low and feel. But let us say that the commission also goes rogue. Then obviously we are there already at the CCJ. And appropriate orders will have to be fashioned to meet the justice of the case.
Correct. Counsel, I want to ask you, as not as necessarily a member at the bar, a member of the bar. I want to ask you as a PPP member here. Your leader signed this agreement with Mr. Granger, the leader of the APNU AFC list. Are you able to say whether your leader would have communicated with Mr. Granger to say, hey, we had an agreement, man. What are you doing? Why are you tearing up this agreement in every part of the way? Has there been any communication between the two? Because the CARICOM report is now done, and yet we're having one delay or another.
As far as I am aware, there is no formal communication. There has been no formal communication. But the basis is not created for formal communication because of the position of Mr. Granger's government. Mr. Granger, as you saw over the past, just before the commission directed Mr. Lowenfield, appeared about 3 days in succession, making statements and making overtures directed obviously to the commission, trying to influence the chairperson. And this is a gentleman who has not faced the press prior to that for months.
Yes.
But he has been doing that during this exercise. And that I cannot, knowing of the structure of the PNC and the APNU, the leader there is Maximum. We all know that. That's from Bornham's party. Desmond Hoyt was able to throw out Hamilton Green, powerful politician, because he was the leader. When the leader speaks, the leader speaks. Mr. Granger is no different. It's the same party structure. I say that to say that he may be silent, but these actions are being done with his authority.
Yes, he did come out and endorse everything Harman said and so forth.
Exactly.
But
So what is there to say
correct.
to a man like that?
On
Who
that
cares
point,
not for his country and is prepared to defy CARICOM, defy the Commonwealth, defy the ABC countries, defy all the observers, defy his own son-in-law?
On that point too, Council, we are mindful and we will be sending an invitation to Mr. Jagdeo to probably join us because, as you know, the president, I believe he did it intentionally for pure political purposes, of course, in terms of mentioning the other day live that he and Barry Jagdeo would have been having discussions about what was it, power sharing or something like that. And at this ninth moment, now he's bringing that to the public, which I found was a bit of a real rank opportunism. But I would want to engage with, I mean, I can't ask you to speak on behalf of Mr. Jagdeo. I would want to engage with him. But on the face of it, sir, are you aware or would you be able to comment on whether there has been any type of respectable discussion with APNU AFC on a matter of power sharing?
No, I don't know of anything like that. And you have to be realistic. Who will want to engage in any kind of arrangement with a political party that has shown absolute disrespect for the Constitution, for the laws of the country? What are you going to enter into? What arrangement, my brother? What guarantee you have that they wouldn't kick you out the next day and take over the government? How can you enter into what kind of pact? They don't obey the most fundamental law of the land. They don't obey the laws of the land. You want to have an agreement with them and expect that they will obey it? You want to put a cocaine addict to watch the cocaine?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, from a political perspective as well, you have seen the Justice for All party has now said, distancing themselves from the coalition. What does that tell you, sir, in terms of, is that creating in your mind a shake within the coalition from a legal perspective as well?
I have said, and I will continue to say, that there are 30 or 40 persons in the rigging cabal. It may have been reduced now. It's about 10 to 15 who are spearheading this operation. You heard Ramjatan concession speech. I know of many of the ministers who have packed up and so on already. There are a couple of them that are holding on for dear life. You understand?
Yes.
And more, they will be left in smaller numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nagamutu is a rank opportunist. He has no shame, no integrity whatsoever. So he will go, once he gets an opportunity to continue to live on Main Street and don't want to move back in his house in Sapphire, he will stay on there and he will utter the kind of nonsense that you referred to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Ramjatan has given up, but somebody promised him something and give him some hope. He is on the TV every night with Duncan and Chris Jones talking foolishness.
Right. So, Council, what would be your party's thinking going to tomorrow's meeting, for example, with GCOM? Supposing the APNU AFC commissioners do not turn up, and that's speaking with the presumption that the PPP's commissioners will turn up to that meeting?
I haven't had an opportunity to speak to the commissioners as yet. I just learned of the meeting just prior to this program.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where, what if the meeting is on and that kind of thing. And I don't wish to speculate at this stage.
Gotcha. To reiterate though, Madam, the chairman, she made a release. It would have probably been the day before, 2 days before this matter came up with David versus GCOM. She made a release in which she was quite specific that she cannot arrogate to the commission the role of the court. And given what you said earlier, Council, that the court really did not make any decision, for our viewers and listeners, Madam Claudia Singh can now hold up her release as the way forward, because the court did not challenge anything in her release, did not comment to to any effect any of the matters in her release. She now has the wherewithal of going forward on that.
That's correct. And you're calling it her release. But it is the reflection of a unanimous decision of GCOM. Nobody, when Justice Singh, when the commission made this decision, which is titled the chairperson decision, the chairperson alone can make a decision of GCOM. The GCOM is constituted by 7 persons. So it means that everyone agreed.
Right.
If you read the Constitution, GCOM makes decisions by vote.
Yes.
So this is a reflection of a unanimous decision taken by GCOM.
Correct.
And as you correctly said, the court did not touch this declaration, this decision. And moreover, a decision was asked, a declaration was sought, directed to GCOM, and it was dismissed by the Court of Appeal.
So, Counsel, if I may, where does GCOM go from here if an inaccurate report by Lowenfield is submitted and it is rejected by GCOM?
Well, GCOM can either direct him to bring another report, or GCOM can declare the results. The results, Gildari, is not a secret anymore. Everyone knows what the results are. It's only the declaration is a very ceremonial, very formal act.
So
the results have already been counted and made public.
Counsel, the one thing that I wish to seek your clarity or your comment on is Justice Singh noted that the Commission cannot arrogate unto itself the jurisdiction to annul. So we know that's out of the window. Nothing has been said or done since that can change that. The other part is really where the contention is, that GCOM could not have thereby closed it itself with the jurisdiction to establish itself as a court. However, if Lowenfield were to use his own numbers, if he was to minguize his numbers, it means that Lowenfield has become the judge, jury, and execution. It means Lowenfield would have conducted an investigation into the allegations. Now, Lowenfield does not have, and the GCOM does not have the powers to investigate. APNU AFC made allegations, but there has been no, is your party aware of any investigation into these allegations, sir?
My friend, let me start with, if GCOM doesn't have the power,
yes,
we accept that, right? GCOM doesn't have the power. Lowenfield is a subset of GCOM. Where will Lowenfield get the power? If the mighty commission doesn't have it, how can a member of the secretariat that is a subset of the commission has the power? That's the first thing. Secondly, if GCOM, the Justice Singh said, only a court can determine this issue. How can Lowenfield, if the commission, the whole commission that is so powerful, cannot convert itself into a court, how can Lowenfield do it? One individual. Thirdly, Lowenfield, as you know, never held any investigation, never afforded anyone a hearing, never heard anyone, never offered anyone to rebut the evidence, the allegation, never allowed anyone to lead evidence to contradict the allegation. How, by what methodology can Lowenfield invalidate my vote?
Correct.
Which legal system will allow that to happen?
And at the risk of being a little pedantic here to our viewers and listeners, what I was getting at when I was asking Mr. Nandlall to comment on that is the following. If Lowenfield was to investigate an allegation that let me use Mr. Dave Kisoon, that Mr. Dave Kisoon was not in the country, but his serial number was ticked off as having voted, he ought to have given, one would expect, the Mr. Dave Kisoon an opportunity to say, hey, I'm here. And to do so, then it means he has to probably invite the public to appear and to dispute, because APNU AFC is on air saying that they went into there on a matter of hearsay to call out serial numbers. And mind you, viewers and listeners, there has been no validation that whatever GCOM said was ticked was indeed ticked. I want everybody to remember that. The observers did not get to verify that whatever GCOM said was a ticked voter was indeed ticked. The local observers also confirmed.
But let us also deal practically.
Mm-hmm.
Lowenfield at some point in time said he relied on the immigration record. No, my brother, we put out how many persons out there, taped them, who were said to be overseas by virtue of the immigration record, and they were here.
Mm-hmm.
Kaieteur News spoke to a family in East Berbice who said, who APNU objected to that they were overseas, and I believe the police commissioner, I think, confirmed that they were overseas, and the people called Kaieteur and said that they were in Guyana and voted for APNU.
But Council Mr. Alexander was on this program, and he said that the commission will not go and read a newspaper. If you, the political parties, have found a challenge to the source, he called them the source, meaning the immigration records, then you ought to write the commission. But the commission is not going to rely on a newspaper article.
How Alexander wants us to contribute to the pantomime that he wants to create. What basis Alexander has or the commission has to deliberate on I sending them information that this man is in Guyana? They can't act on the first allegation. That is what they wanted us to do, to send in our information so that they can, I don't know, they can play judges in there, and then they will hear us. And what kind of foolishness is that?
Mm-hmm. So
we never got, in a court of law, Mr. Commissioner of Police would have had to come into the witness box and tender his list. And then we would have had an opportunity to cross-examine him to show where his list is defective. And so the death certificate guy would have got to do the same thing. Because we have people that they have issued death certificates for, and the people are alive.
Right.
So I hear Alexander saying that the production of the death certificate is proof that the person died. It's prima facie proof. In a court, if you produce a death certificate, I have a right to question it. Especially since Felix was the one who was directing the birth certificate and death certificate people to spin off these things for the purpose of these allegations.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at them, all the death certificates that they have were issued around the same time, the 5th of June, 2020.
Right, yes, indeed. So, one other technical aspect I want you to address. Let us just presume and pray. I mean, for me, it's a prayer that tomorrow GCOM meets and with alacrity, declaration is made, and President-elect Irfan Ali is sworn in. Would that, if that happened within the next day or 2 days, will that affect your team's desire to still appeal this matter to another court?
Not at all, because as I said, the main thrust of our desire to appeal is not really to deal with this case. As I said, that this case is badly, they decided nothing.
Mm-hmm.
This is an innocuous ruling. It is really to overrule the Court of Appeal, giving itself jurisdiction, and to redirect the electoral law of this country to its proper course.
Right.
Because, as I said, we can't leave the law in this state of chaos. We can't. And confusion.
Right.
We
Com-
need clarity.
in terms of order of day now, I mean, in terms of what did PPP see, you and your colleagues there, as you see one new machination step forward after another, what must be going through you and your fellow leadership persons within the PPP?
The PPP is the party of Cherry Jagan. We were birthed in struggle. The history of the PPP is the history of a struggle for freedom and democracy in this country. And we will not stop. It took the PPP with Dr. Jagan and Mrs. Jagan 28 years to remove them.
Right.
We are very close to remove them in just under 5 years. So we are prepared for the long haul. They will have to be removed, and the will of the people must prevail.
Right. One of the reasons I asked you this question is the obvious effect of the narrative of APNU AFC, the changing but still continuous narrative. So obviously there is a group of persons, sizable or not, but there are persons who continue to follow this narrative, and they obviously allow themselves to believe what is happening there. To my mind, that is telling me that when you guys are sworn in, your job is going to be extremely difficult because you are going to be faced with any number of persons that will refuse to accept your government.
Well, Yog, it is an unfortunate reality, but we will have to deal with that. In 1999, because we are dealing with a grouping of persons who, I don't know what is their mental state, but they don't accept election results when they lose. And when they are offered a chance to be in government, they are incompetent, corrupt, and they neglect, and then they lose elections and they don't want to come out. In 92 elections is the same thing. 97 elections is the same thing. 2001 election, the only election they accepted was 2006.
And to that point, Council, you have a unique situation, isn't it? I heard the discussion the other day where members of the PPP was inferring that every time the PPP wins, at every election that you guys win, there's either violence or there is, you have had cases where you had to give up a year or two shaved off from your term in office. Here is where you have the opposite has happened. APNU lost the NCM vote almost a year and a half ago now, but they continue to remain in office. What's your comment on that?
Well, I don't know how long you'll have to bear this cross. I said one time that Forbes Barnum was described by a former Barbadian prime minister as a cross that every Caribbean person has to bear. Well, he has left his legacy here, and we have to deal with it. Look, losing and winning at elections happen in every country. Donald Trump won. I think Hillary Clinton had the popular vote, and he won.
Yes.
That half of America didn't feel that they were left back.
Correct.
And they were marginalized, and all this fabrication that we're hearing now. The Caribbean, very small democracies, they're close fights.
Yes.
But one party loses, you go and you try to improve yourselves. We lost in 2015, and then they were so miserable in office that they lost the 2016 local government election. They lost the 2018 local government election. They lost the no confidence motion, and they lost the 2020 election. Whose fault is that?
Correct.
Whose fault is that, my brother?
Correct. Well, the truth is that we have said it on this program before, and I think one of our overseas visitors would have, one of our overseas guests would have said it. But, Counsel, what, other than access to the courts, this is a difficult question. What do you do? What can you do when a government refuses to give up power after having lost elections?
Fortunately, we don't live in an island or on an island. We live in a community. CARICOM has issued a very strong statement, or personnel within CARICOM, threatening expulsion. Commonwealth has issued similar sentiments. The ABC countries have repeatedly spoken about sanctions, personal sanctions. I don't know why they're waiting so long. This is a time as good as any to impose some sanctions. And so it's going to have international repercussions.
Right.
So they will not be able to survive in government.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they believe, if they can survive in government. They will not be able to.
But
Now is not 30 years ago when Borden rigged elections. The world has changed. And the powers that be in the world will not allow authoritarian governments and political dictatorships to be created. Not, at least not in this hemisphere.
Correct. So, Counsel, I mean, to our viewers and listeners, please, I wish to say this very, very openly. Our program is always open to members of ACNO AFC to also join and sit with a Mr. Nandlall or any one of the persons from the opposite sides and let us have a discussion. We have always extended that invitation, and that continues to be. But, Counsel, the problem gets to be almost surreal in one aspect. And here is my thought. Today we have seen Venezuela, viewers and listeners, today Venezuela would have made a release to say, why you want to go sit at the international courts? Let us have dialogue. So Guyana's situation is, who will have dialogue with these people? There is no legitimate government in place. And Venezuela obviously know exactly what they're doing by making such a statement. Counsel, does it speak to a weakness on our part now to not be able to even respond to Venezuela?
It shows you, Yog, the lengths that this rigging cabal is prepared to go in their pursuit of political power. They are prepared to threaten and expose our territorial sovereignty. They are prepared to expose us to the dangers that Venezuela poses. Don't think Venezuela likes us. Venezuela recognizes that there is a political vacuum here, or a chaotic political situation, and they are capitalizing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the destruction that have happened in this country over the past 100 or how many days that we are in this intransitory state? The damage to the economy, the damage to social relations among and between our people, the damage to race relations, the damage to commerce, the damage to our international image as a country.
Right.
But these people don't care. They don't care. Look at what they're doing with state assets. Look at the way that they are looting state assets. Read the Kaieteur News and see how many blocks of lands are being shared away.
Correct.
While they must know that they don't have the capacity.
Correct.
To do it.
So that's one thing that every night in Room 592 I've appealed, and thankfully our appeals have been bearing fruit. We have viewers and listeners who want to share this with you. A week ago, we appealed for the religious community to speak out. We have had a press release started by the Center for Interreligious Dialogue, and immediately following that, one after the other organization would have come out and spoken. Today, the Guyana Islamic Trust has called for action. We do know that the Arya Samaj grouping across the country, more than 100 members of the Arya Samaj body in Guyana would have signed demanding that Granger concede. So a lot of persons are coming out. And in addition, Leonard Gilari, what we have seen on one of the calls I want to make here today, ladies and gentlemen, to those viewers and listeners that are backing the APNU AFC in doing what they are, I want to remind you, all of the land that is being stolen, all of the properties and assets that are being taken away presently, you are not getting any. It's a handful of people taking these things, putting it in their names and their family names, and all of you who are forming part of the chorus, you are getting nothing. And the truth is, we all need to remind Granger, stop squatting in the people's seat that is called the presidential seat. Stop squatting there and let democracy prevail. Because, sir, take your rightful place in the opposition and try again in 5 years. If you continue like this, there is not trial because you have already failed. But, Council, I want to come back to... Yes, go on.
I want to assure everyone listening that from the moment that the no confidence motion was passed, this government assumed a particular status that incapacitated it from engaging in transactions of that type. And every single transaction that they have engaged in, that they were not authorized to engage in, will be reviewed and rescinded. So all these land deals and all the land deals that they did before, after they lost legitimacy and squatted in office, they are all going to be reviewed and rescinded.
Great. So, Council, another thing that I know this is outside of the legal ambit, but, you know, COVID continues to ravage our country in a much greater way than the numbers are showing and proving, because there's just not any testing going on. And we do know that PAHO WHO would have brought in approximately 4,000 kits about 2 weeks ago, but we are not seeing any baseline being set up and so forth. Now, on a matter of national emergency, sir, can you and your party make some national call with regards to this health emergency, notwithstanding elections and all of the frustrations on that side?
Well, we have a COVID task force that we have set up in our party, headed by, I think, Gail Teixeira, Frank Anthony, and so on. A whole group of them. And they have been doing work. They have been doing work across the country. But of course, that's another manifestation of the mindset or the neglect. I can't find adjectives to describe the attitude of this government and the few people who are prepared to sit by, squat in office, and see people die every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And people are dying every day.
Right.
And they continue to plunder the treasury and not giving the benefits of the money to the people of this country. Tests are not being done. Kits are not being imported. But look at the amount of money that they're paying to fix Ocean View.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And we are seeing that Kaieteur News, ladies and gentlemen, would have reported in today's newspaper the fantastic sum that is being paid for rental of that Ocean View building. And mind you, we're not talking anything about retrofitting, about putting stuff on the inside. We're not talking anything to protect it from high tides. We're not talking anything. And remember, again, ladies and gentlemen, that is supposed to be something that would be a place for people to recover, but we do not have that amount of persons having COVID-19 to even justify spending $2-3 billions of dollars to build that facility. Remember too, this is the same government that immediately squashed the specialty hospital that could have been done at a far lesser amount of money than the $2-3 billion that will be spent, that is spending here. Mr. Goben Harberton, thank you for being on the program, sir. I acknowledge your questions, but I cannot ask counsel to repeat those things. Please look at the recording, because we dealt in depth with the decision today and the implications of those decisions. Counsel, I want to bring you right back to these elections, sir. The next 2-3 days, of course, is going to be very important. However, sir, one of our viewers has sent this. I don't know if it's a fair question to ask you, but I'll ask anyway. Given the penchant of APNU, displayed by APNU, to stay and retain power, it seems like at any cost, they are now willing to listen to anything other than you've won. Is there a likelihood that the president could declare a state of emergency at any time to thwart a swearing-in? And what would the PPP's position be?
Let me go back quickly to the hospital, the Ocean View. Just look at that one project, you. Look at that one project, and you will realize why this government can never win an election in this country. That one single project, and that is how they behaved and conducted themselves for the past 5 years. Every single project was as disastrous as that one. But let me answer your question. The president has very limited powers. A state of emergency cannot be called between an election and the declaration of a results. More particularly, period, it can be called. It's not possible. The Constitution will never allow a state of emergency to be called during that period, simply because you can have a rogue head of state who realizes that he loses the elections, and to avert an adverse declaration, he invokes a state of emergency and remains there forever. The law will not permit such abuse of power. Your volume, Luke.
Sorry about that. Council, on another note, over the past week, we would have seen a brand new narrative started. And this narrative is headlined Cambridge Analytica. I am mindful that former President Donald Ramotar's name was mentioned explicitly. And, I have, and I will be inviting Mr. Ramotar if it's suitable to him to come on at some time and talk about it. However, Council, before I ask you to answer, ladies and gentlemen, I have myself been speaking to a number of persons, and it seems like we, the people, need to get to the bottom of exactly who employed Cambridge Analytica, who employed Cambridge would have been divided into 2 or 3 subsets, who employed the subsets, and there is a figure of about $3 million that would have been paid by a particular political party. And Mr. Nandlall, I wanted you to comment on that while also telling the viewers and listeners, a lot of you are being beaten up that the PPP would have taken Mercury for $34 million. But we seem to forget that JJ and B LLC was also contracted by APNU AFC for $90 odd million. So, Council, this whole thing about all of the lobbyists now seems to be the people who rigged these elections for and on behalf of the PPP, whilst you guys are in opposition.
Now, I don't know much about this Cambridge Analytica, honestly, and I will defer to Mr. Comrade Donald Ramatar whenever he comes to the program, or other party leaders who are in the know.
Okay.
But what I don't understand is what is it that we are being accused of? Hiring a lobby firm? I don't see anything wrong with that. That is being done all over the world. APNU hired a firm from Jamaica in 2015, among other firms. Did we hire Cambridge? Assuming, of course, because I don't know, assuming that we hired Cambridge Analytical, did they commit some illegal act in the country? Every time people go to an election or parties go to an election, they hire lobbyist firms.
Right.
And in any event, Cambridge Analytica, based upon the information I'm reading, was supposed to have been hired by the PVP for the 2015 elections. We lost elections. What is the problem? They did a terrible job, obviously. So I don't understand what is the big deal.
Right. Well, you did mention that firm from Jamaica, and for viewers and listeners, that firm from Jamaica would have been a subset of the same Cambridge Analytica.
Well, who hired that for, my brother?
Yes, that's the point I wanted to bring out. That narratives are being related, but the people needs to realize what Kool-Aid you are drinking. Leonard, over to you, my friend.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask the good counsel, that one state majority, let's assume we be looking forward now. Is that something that is going to characterize Guyana politics going forward? Is it something that the PPP should be worried about?
I have said before on another program that we are going to have close elections in the future. And I hasten to say that that is not necessarily a bad thing, because it will increase competition and it will force competent government, accountable government, non-corrupt government, and it will force government to deliver on their manifesto promises. Because if you do not perform, then it is easy to remove you. I mean, if you perform well, then you will be able to increase your seat to a 2-seat majority, which might be a little better. But it cannot be something that's bad. And I am looking forward to working in that kind of environment where you have constructive opposition. That's what we want. Constructive engagement, constructive opposition. You can't, it hurts my heart to think that we have to go into parliament and look at people who rigs election and don't obey the laws and they cannot effectively represent their constituency. As I said also, I don't mind a constituency different from the PVP that votes for a grouping of leaders of their choice. I will fight every day for their right to do so. But I have a fundamental difficulty with a grouping of leaders who are uncivilized, who are barbaric, who are not prepared to act democratically and behave in accordance with the rule of law. Then we have a difficulty. How do you engage those people seriously?
Correct.
And that is a fundamental problem that we have in this country.
But isn't that one of you're right, fundamental problem, because now the handful of troublemakers, this handful of squatters, they are seeing that there's probably nothing for them in the future if they allow the power to go to you guys.
But that is not it. If they have behaved in a way that disqualifies them from being elected, if they have made themselves unelectable, whose fault is that? Which rational voter will want to vote for Nagamutu anymore? Or Joseph Harmon, having regard to the positions that they have taken? Rational voter, not voter that are acting on instincts and emotions. I'm talking about an objective, dispassionate voter. Now, we could have done the same thing in 2015, and we would have been equally unelectable.
That's right.
But what did we do? We hit the ground. We worked hard. We traveled, we walked this country. But they don't want to do that.
Correct.
They abandoned the people of this country, including their base. And many people did not turn out to vote for them. They want to use force and violence or threat of violence to remain in office.
So thank you for that, Council. And as we're getting to that time when we're going to wrap up our program, I just want to come back to you in terms of, ladies and gentlemen, to recap what transpired today. Anybody who would have joined us late know that there was a decision or a non-decision, and what we discussed, Council will put it best in his words, but there's nothing that changes or challenges the release or the decision of the commission that would have been issued approximately a week ago. That the commission is not a court. The commission cannot arrogate to itself the ability to declare an election and not to annul an election and things like that. And we discussed earlier, Mingo does not have the wherewithal or the authority to conduct an investigation. Mind you, all of the allegations of irregularity remain just that up to today, allegation. Council, kindly, in court you would have made your closing argument, but today,
But before he does that, I would like to just ask him during his closing thing, which is a good position. Has he started thinking about a position that he would like to serve in? Would he like to go back to the AG position?
We got so many hurdles, unfortunately, to cross before we reach that. I'm sure at a more suitable time we can discuss that. So permit me to omit answering that question. Yoga, as I said from the beginning, the decision of the Court of Appeal, in my humble and respectful view, is wrong in many respects. Well, it's not. The Court of Appeal was wrong in giving itself jurisdiction when clearly it did not have jurisdiction. And fortunately, it did not grant any effective, potent, or enforceable reliefs. All it did was to make a declaration that votes means valid votes. Votes in the law means valid votes. Votes in the law cannot mean anything other than valid votes.
Okay.
Right? As I said, when the law refers to anything, any object, without further adjective, it means a legal object.
Right.
Any noun. If you say that it's a glass, it means it's a legal glass. It can't mean it's an illegal glass. So when the law says valid votes, it means a valid vote. When the law says a child, it means a legal child. If the law wants to say illegitimate child, it will say illegitimate child. When the law says you are married, it means a legal marriage. It can mean an illegal marriage, an adulterous arrangement. It must mean marriage is a legal, valid marriage. Similarly, when it says votes, it means valid votes.
Right.
So I don't understand the big hullabaloo that I see being made out there. And the Nagamoto's, he will spin for the rest of his life. Because he has spent his whole life spinning. But it's unfortunate that they are misleading their supporters and creating this kind of unfortunate hostility in the atmosphere. So I believe that the commission remains unaffected by this decision. The commission has already determined what valid votes are Keith Lowenfield has already submitted to the commission the total valid votes. The commission has already directed him to prepare his report based upon the total valid votes, and he is enjoined and duty bound only to do that. He has no jurisdiction, he has no power, he has no authority either to depart from that direction, to disobey it, or to countermand it. He cannot, Lowenfield, as the commission itself said, that the commission can't arrogate onto itself to their court. It can't determine credibility of elections. It can't hear and determine allegations. If the commission, the whole can do it. A subset of the whole, of which Lowenfield is, can do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yes.
So Lowenfield can't do any other thing legally than produce a report that speaks to the valid votes in the statutory form. And the commission should direct him and let him bring the report and move ahead with the declaration.
Thank you.
But as I said, we need for the future to clarify the state of the law because of the confusion that the law has been plunged into. Yes. Because of these various legal forays, born out of desperation and born out of a political situation where you don't have a legal issue. Right. But the courts now are being abused and bombarded with political litigation that does not raise legal issues. Unfortunately, the court seem to take a position that entertains them rather than deal with them swiftly as the court should.
Thank you.
So that is where I will conclude you.
Thank you, Counsel. And Counsel, I need some legal advice from you. When a government would, is it the right term to say legitimize squatting? When squatters take over an area, a piece of land, what do you do if you want to recognize them and give them their land? Is it called legitimizing that?
Well, the term that we have been using in the PPP is to regularize.
Regularize. Thank you. Thank you. So I asked you that because, ladies and gentlemen, as we bring our program to a close tonight, I just want to say, Mr. Granger, stop squatting. That office will not be regularized or legitimized for any continued occupation outside of the will of the electorate. The people of this country have spoken since March 2nd, and you know you have lost these elections, sir. You should do the decent thing. Stop prolonging this. Stop prolonging, because you are now inserting delays into your own four-step process. Let us stop, put country above self, and let us move on. You can do this tomorrow, sir, and we certainly expect you to do that. Leonard, any closing words from you, sir?
Absolutely. So we're going to be back tomorrow. According to our reports here, Guyana Elections Commission is supposed to be meeting tomorrow at 11. So we're going to be hitting the road running at 1:30 p.m. sharp. That is going to be elections COVID-19 watch. We have to be looking at COVID. There's breaking news this afternoon. 21 new cases being added, so we passed the 200 mark. And guess what's the problem? It's in Region 1, so we want to be discussing that tomorrow. We understand 2 students from a school in Region 9 has been tested positive, and Region 9 is right next to Brazil, right? Region 1 is right next to Venezuela. We have some big issues there. Tomorrow, 1:30 p.m., elections and COVID-19 watch. So we're going to be with you 1:30 p.m. sharp. Right here on Kaieteur 99.1, 99.5. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nandlall, for joining us at short notice. I know you're busy, but we certainly look forward to your continued guidance through this process.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here, and good evening to all your viewers.
Thank you.
And listeners.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Leonard Gildari and yours truly will be seeing you tomorrow at 1:30 on Kaieteur Radio, 99.1 FM, 99.5 FM. Remember, you can always join us on Kaieteur Radio, YouTube, Facebook, and on all those little apps you can have on your phone to tune into us anytime we are on. It was a pleasure to accommodate Mr. Anil Nandlall here to tell us and walk us through what happens today. We certainly call on all of you, remain calm, remain focused, and know that the best days of this country is still ahead of us. And we can make it be what it has not been by working together as one people, one nation, with a single destiny that must not be split and divided into political patronage or opportunism that takes us nowhere. Goodbye and good night to you all. And President Granger, hope we get some good news from you tomorrow, sir. As you say, I concede. I can help you to say it if you wish. Good night, one and all. Bye-bye now.
Good night.